Welcome. We want to just go around quickly and say who we are, because I know we have some guests today. Okay, I'll start on please. I'm the chair of the policy committee and school board member. Probably go because you might not know me. I'm Jennifer Smith. I'm in the legal department. And I took over the yes, because of the body worn camera policy in schools. Perfect, thank you. Lisa Rappaport, school board chair.
Seth Landrum, I'm lieutenant of enforcement PD obviously, and personnel training. And I was kind of working on this revision specific to this rules.
Hi, good morning, Mike Maloney, Deputy Chief of Police.
Patty Hayes, Assistant Superintendent.
Steve Adler, School Board.
Paulette Rice, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent.
All right. Thank you. So we'll dive into body camera policy.
Great.
Or I guess, sorry, it's not,
Well,
not
it's not-
quite a policy.
We're trying, so I also had included as part of the packet, I ran it off this morning, the memo that Zach provided back in our September board meeting that brought this up. Because the SROs would have been at that point wearing the body cams. And so this was the memo that Zach provided the board at that point. And we are looking at it now, and Jennifer's here to talk about the MOA, MOU. I'm not sure what the vowel is that we're using. The memorandum, let me put it that way, and what that's going to look like. And Seth is here to speak to exactly what's going on the PD side of it. So I'll turn it over to the folks who are the experts.
Class, draft MOU, which is largely in your memo, Deputy Chief. If you take one of each. I did it as an MOU. I'm also passing around, in case you guys didn't already, the police body worn camera policy and the MOU that is currently in existence between the school department and the PD on the SRO.
Right.
One of each, please. So you guys, here can take a look and you tell me if the tone is like, I can listen more than anything else and just make sure to capture what you guys want. But in terms of what what requirements are that you put in your September memo, Deputy, I think I put it all there. Could add some, some tonal changes to where as well as.
Could I ask one question just to frame this up in my brain?
Yeah.
Are we, as a committee and as a board, being asked to approve a policy, or are we simply being asked to accept an MOU that is reached?
Well, my understanding from when Zach popped into the last meeting was that he hadn't intended for us to approve policy necessarily, but that we did all feel it was important to have this memorandum of understanding. But then I thought from our conversation after that, we agreed as a committee that we felt it would be important to have our own policy that at least referenced this MOU so that we had somewhere to go back specifically within our policy manual for people to understand that relationship. So I think it's both.
So Board of Operations is we would accept the MOU and then draft a policy based on that afterwards?
You mean as a board?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just wanted
That
to,
would be my understanding of it. Patty, do you think that makes sense as well?
Yes, and I think there was some mention last time, if I'm not misremembering, about making sure that the families were aware of this
Right.
also. And I don't know if that was the policy piece or we wanted it included in school handbooks, things like that.
Well, that would be a good question then. Which part goes in the handbook?
Right.
I would think that the policy should be enough to go in the handbook and then it could reference the MOU.
Yeah.
Just because I think that's the way we do it with most things.
Yeah.
And so I think that if everybody's in agreement, I think that seems like it makes sense in terms of the process. And my question had been sort of, it gets answered right here, but I wanted to just make sure we, as a board, as we go to defend this policy, or as a committee, I mean, as we go to defend this policy with the board, that we had an understanding of why Portsmouth even uses body cameras, because I know that can be sort of controversial topic, so. But I see you have the purpose right here, so that might be the answer.
Worth noting in case there's on the table and not aware that this was pretty late in adopting body worn cameras. So standard, I defer to you guys, but I think
Yeah.
it should be.
So what's been, could you just explain very briefly what has been the motivation for using?
Transparency, accountability, training, quality assurance. There was a time, probably 7 years ago, the police department formed a committee made up of community stakeholders, body worn camera policy implementation review committee. And at that time, 7 years ago or so, it was determined by that committee, which was not just the police department, but again, community engaged, community stakeholders and representatives from the city at large, that body cameras were not necessary or needed at that point. There was an adage years ago that police departments may earn their way into wearing body cameras, which means that your actions might dictate that recording things might be better for the community. We weren't in that position, but regardless, the committee decided that body cams weren't a great fit for the city. Since that time, the world has changed quite a bit. And really, it's been a focus, really we almost got to the point where, do we want to be the only police department that doesn't have body cameras? And we were kind of slowly moving in that direction where it's just become such a more prevalent, useful tool for both the police and the communities that they serve, that we've adopted the body cam program after review and after bargaining with the applicable unions on their use, because the people that wear them are part of bargaining units. So we had it added into contractual language that body cams would be implemented. I would say since we've had them rolled out, it hasn't even been a year yet that they've been a great success for us. And they've been extremely helpful in prosecution, in citizen complaints, in training. We have review committees for use of force. We have review committees for pursuits. Now we're able to not just read what the officers wrote, but we're able to see it. So they have been very successful since they've been implemented, and we're thankful to have them, which is, again, not where we were 7 years ago. I think there was a lot of concern, some pushback, but things have changed, and I think officers have seen the benefits of the body cams and not just Big Brother watching all the time. And I think a lot of the officers are actually happy they have them. In fact, that Lieutenant Tondero works in personnel and training, and he does a lot of recruiting, and we've hired a number of officers from other agencies across the country who have previously worn body cams, and they would ask, like, do you have body cams? Because they want them. So that's what we're seeing more now. So they've been very successful for us.
It might be helpful if you explain a little bit, I referenced it at the end, but the SOP about release of information. Maybe folks would appreciate when footage would go out to the general public.
Sure. So our policy is largely word for word with the state law in New Hampshire with respect to body cams, when you use them, when you don't use them, retention and destruction of recorded videos, and when things can be deleted and overwritten and how long certain things need to be stored. And with that, according to the state's right to know law 91A, there's only 3 instances of which body cam footage is exempt to 91A, or the other way around, is that under 91A, everything that a body camera records is exempt, which means your routine 91As, I want to see a video, they're not publicly disclosable under 91A, with the exception of 3 instances. Number 1, a felony level arrest. Number 2, a use of force incident. Or number 3, discharge of a firearm or deadly force. Everything else under 91A is declined. So those are the only 3 occasions that somebody can submit a right to know request, and it would be allowable under 91A. Everything else is not released.
Another maybe legal question, but the law's a little murky at this time, but there's been a lot of push and conquer to restrict video and audio recording in public schools. And I understand this is a law enforcement issue and not necessarily subject to that, but what would be our ability to pivot, I guess? Or how would those 2 things interplay? Do we know?
So I'll speak to that quickly
Okay,
and then.
sorry,
you guys.
it's a little murky because the law is kind of fast moving in terms of what might change by June,
Right.
but
So I specifically was general about, will abide by the laws rather than reference the Parents' Bill of Rights specifically, and that, especially since, as you point out, you call murky, I would just call it flux. They just, because the legislature just realized they kind of, excuse my colloquialism, screwed up. And so now, you can record a recording of that.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I think we just kind of steer clear of that in terms of explicitly referencing, but
that makes sense.
but law enforcement is exempt from that. That is not a school
Okay,
from the needing to get consent to record your kid, assuming.
it follows.
Right.
Okay.
So if there's an active commission of a crime, and I defer to you two on this, but if pursuant to the policy, the camera needs to be activated, it is exempt from the Parents' Bill of Rights. You don't need to get permission from a parent to record your kid who's actively committing a crime. But, and you guys can do this better than I can. I don't want to embarrass myself by going forward, but there are circumstances where you say, I'm entering, you are going to be filmed, do I have permission? And the student, just like anyone, would have the ability to decline until you determine a crime is being committed, and then you can record, and you would have to redact or delete the portion that the person did not consent to until the crime is committed. Did I watch that?
That's it. No.
So does that answer?
I think so. So we have families who right now just opt out, not many, but a few who opt out of video and photo. But in the case where the body cam is warranted by this policy, that opt out would not apply, basically.
Correct.
Okay. So I just think communicating that and whatever way to do in the handbook would be helpful for that one parent who will call.
Well, presumably there might be others who were recorded sort of tangentially too, even if they weren't the one committing the crime.
Yeah.
So that could be a factor, but I think what you're saying is law enforcement is exempt from that.
Okay.
So there are, it's a little bit of an interlocking. Deputy Chief, you could speak to this better than I can, but with FERPA and the language, I think, is particular footage is directly related to a student. And the example, I think, in the statute is if you're filming someone in a sports setting where you're focused on the kid getting the field goal, but behind are 2 kids and you can really make out who they are, that becomes a FERPA issue. So these are going to be where you have to redact those spaces because even though it's not directly related to them, you can make them out and identify them. So it would probably be case by case. And so if body worn cameras were activated, it would be probably an extra level of review here to determine if you can make out faces and redact them.
Right. Yeah, and then it's, only if the video is used and determined to be part of the student's educational record, which is another step, which, FERPA goes into whether or not there may be disciplinary action taken on that student based on the video or image depicted, which is not unlike what the schools have currently is, video. There's no audio, but there's video that's recording at the schools now. I don't know, I suppose you folks would know how many school videos are part of an educational record where there may be a fight in the hallway. And let's say there's two kids fighting in a hallway, it's recorded on school video, and the kids get suspended as a result of the fight. Is your current practice right now to retain that video and include it in the disciplinary file? Or does it become part of their educational record? The body cam is the same thing. It's just, you have videos in your schools right now taping students doing things. Ours is doing the same thing, with the one exception that it does have audio. Your school videos don't have audio. So when we're talking about videos recording students, we're already doing it. We've been doing it for years. So it's really handling it not much different than how you're handling videos now and whether or not they become part of a student's formal educational record. And FERPA kind of speaks to that.
Deputy Chief, does Axon have, facial redaction capability? Right.
Yeah,
Pretty extensive, it's called Redaction Studio. So we bring the video into it and we can do tons of things. We can be very granular about it, so.
So it's more about what's made public or what's shown afterwards than the actual recording of it in terms of the legal factor. Is that what I'm hearing? Because you're recording everything, but then you would redact those.
Well, you would only report in certain circumstances. So the SRO would, as a matter of course, have the body cam in sleep mode.
Yes.
And everything's happy and good, and then someone bursts into the room and committing a crime. Camera activated. And then you have footage which may show everyone in the classroom, which we may redact their faces, and that footage may become part of a court record somewhere. Or someone bursts into the room, it's not a commission of a crime. The officer says, I'm gonna record because something feels off. So, and then they're in a locker room and the kid says, yeah, and now I'm spiraling into like law school fact patterns, but it's going to be so specific.
Yeah.
That I think what you're asking is, yes, you have to see what the video is and then you determine
Okay.
what to do with it.
Okay.
But
In terms of the actual recording, that's the legal piece. It's
It's
what
like-
happens with it.
Right, right. And even activating the camera, there are reasons and protocols that either the responding officer or the SRO be following.
How does the camera activate? Do they have to push a button or is it voice
Have one
activated?
influence.
Look at this. Okay.
Which is, I think it's important to understand too. Sleep mode, we use that term a lot. That means that there's no active recording occurring right now. If I were to double tap this, it would immediately start to record with audio and video. When you're in ready mode, if there's an activation, which is what our patrol officers are generally in, then it goes back 30 seconds with no audio. So it's an important distinction, particularly for parents. So when it's in sleep mode, there's essentially no buffering that's occurring. So that recording would be the second it's activated.
I think that would be important to parents to know if there's somebody who's making a determination based on what they're actually seeing,
Right.
when to activate it.
And if, they make it nice and easy for us, big button in the center, double tap, bloop, bloop, and it starts recording, gives you an audio indication that it's recording and then green light as well, so. That's, I don't know, one to see it as well.
Lieutenant, what happens if you're on patrol in your car
Yeah.
and you get an active call to the school?
So you can either initiate it yourself, but the second you turn our lights on in our cruisers, they immediately activate. So that actually happens, one story, my office kind of abuts the access road. Quite frequently, officers will be responding to a call. They'll turn the lights on in the back and my camera will turn on. So it is sensitive, it works well. Yes.
It's a good distinction to make too, though, because we talk about we're talking mostly about SROs wearing body cameras, but there are occasions when patrol officers respond to a school in addition to the SRO. So, if that officer is responding to a school with lights and siren, that body camera is going to be activated. And our policy is written to, allow that so that the officers on the street are not having to worry about the rules of my body camera when I go to different institutions, my rules when I go to the hospital or this, my rules when I go to the school or this, my rules when I go to a traffic crash or this. It just becomes too much.
Yep.
So thankfully that doesn't happen very often when we have patrol officers responding to assist SROs. And generally speaking, in talking to our SROs, both at the middle school and the high school, I only speak in very generalities, but the amount of times the SROs will activate their body cams are going to be very infrequent. Most of what they do there every day is administrative things, mentoring, presence, informal communication with students, meetings with staff. The body cameras are largely worn by the SROs are going to be they're really not going to be recording that much, only under the perimeters that we've set forth.
Yeah, generally, SROs do a great job of mitigating issues at the schools without having to involve the patrol assets. So again, few instances of a patrol officer actually having to respond to the school to support that SRO. So limited instances.
Two questions. I think the first one you just answered, but if there's a situation like, for example, there's a threat that we need to go to the school to investigate, which has happened a few times in the last few years, unfortunately. In that situation, they would be activated because you're going in to look at what could be a very real crime or threat situation. You are going into classrooms without you can determine there's no threat, that just footage goes away.
If we were to determine
That there
there's,
is not a threat. You sweep the school, you have to go into every classroom in the building. And it's
Well-
rare, but it's happening, and we've dealt with that a few times.
sure, we have, and I would say, although we may determine there's no threat, that doesn't mean there's no crime. Right?
Oh,
Because
fair.
somebody somewhere, whether it was a robocall or a bomb threat or something,
Mhm.
in an instance like that, from a law enforcement standpoint, I would say we now, however, are investigating a crime and we're going to try to figure out who's responsible for this.
Mhm.
Now, the body cam footage that we have of the officers responding is really not part of the crime because the crime's probably electronic. It's probably in an email, it's on a telephone. So the footage is not going to record evidence of that crime, but it would be associated with a crime. So if that answers your question, we may mitigate and say there's no threat, and that doesn't mean there's no crime.
I appreciate that. I think we're just trying to think through what are the sort of things that parents
Yeah.
want to know
Sure.
about how this would happen so that we can communicate that well.
Now, Lucy, you had another question about the storage of or no, it wasn't the storage, but how long things would be retained, right? Yeah.
So we have like retention categories, depending on what the specific report is on. If it's of a crime, felony level, or it's just this call for service. Basically, when we download the footage into our cloud, we have to categorize it. Based on the category that it receives, the retention periods kick in and it's automatically queued for deletion if it's not set aside for prosecution or for administrative reasons. So it's a mechanism that we now are close to a year using and it's worked well. So as long as it's just a call for service, then it's quickly queued for deletion. If it's going to be retained, like I said, for prosecution or something else, it may last longer, but eventually, we can't keep everything. So it's generally kind of down the road.
We have that spelled out in our policy as to the specific level of violation and the corresponding time at which that can be overwritten.
Yes, and
Page 9 on our
This is in your policy.
standard
This
operating.
you're kind of basic call for service, 6 months. That goes quickly.
Is there anything that happens differently for the students who are 18? That would happen for minors? Sound like it, I guess I'm just curious.
No, I think, the only thing that even vaguely comes to mind at 18 is when you're talking about access to educational records where an 18-year-old is considered an adult and doesn't need a parent or guardian acting on their behalf. They could be their own agent, if you will, accessing educational records, but for us, whether they're a minor or an adult, doesn't impact it either way.
And this is sort of me, possible back patterning again, but let's say, in Lisa's, scenario, cameras are activated because of a call. And maybe the crime was electronic, maybe not. So footage exists. And a parent says, my kid saw the officers, so I think my kid was recorded. I want to see the footage. That they wouldn't be able to. Yeah, it's not, you're not entitled to just because. So these are, it's very specific instances where this footage would be seen. Even if it's your kid, you wouldn't be able to.
No.
And presumably, they only could if it became part of their educational record.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, right.
Just bring their own.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
No, but it become part of their educational record. Maybe not going.
I thought I did too, but I don't remember anything.
Yeah, I don't know where.
It's so rare that video, I mean, sometimes it's photos, but like even that, like I'm thinking about some of the things like. It could be screenshots of text messages. I think about like bullying situations. It's more things like that than an actual video. It's so rare. I mean, yeah.
It's really helpful. I feel like once we're done, being able to have some sort of fact sheet, maybe that we can send out to families and to students at the high school level so they understand some of this and not this language and more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
well,
can work with you on that once we're through the process.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, our implementation, and our research into this, for us, because it involves, it's a big change in the way officers work every day. They're now recording almost everything they're doing. We formed a committee to research the implementation here. We traveled to probably half a dozen police departments in the state and said, tell us about your program. What do you like? What do you not like? What did you expect to be a problem that wasn't a problem? What did you find was a problem that you didn't expect to be a problem? So we stole information from a whole bunch of people to try to roll out our program. And it took a long time. So because it's important. So all the questions that you're asking, all the questions that parents are gonna ask. We met with the legal department a number of times, going over our proposed policy to make sure we were kind of lockstep with them, to make sure the city as a whole felt good with it. So, yeah, particularly for parents of students and students, the questions are welcome and they're valid questions, hopefully we have all the answers and I'm happy to put something together, frequently asked questions or whatever you decide to do.
We've
Yeah,
been
because-
fantastic SRO, so I feel like it's more just a communication piece, so
Yeah.
that people aren't surprised or.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're.
Well, even
They'll trust
having
it all.
them like available, like even like an open house at the beginning of the year where they could answer questions if parents have them.
Would you say based on the research you've done in the state, that the way that we are using them in this, or that we're proposing to use them in the schools is consistent with the rest of the state?
Yes, yeah, and again, the rest of the state is following the state law. The state laws rather brief on actually what it says. It says you can only use in schools at this. But it doesn't get into the weeds of, well, can the and a staff member view it, or, it doesn't get into all that. So we kind of went into that a little bit deeper, but, in large part, all the departments that we've met following state law and their anecdotal day-to-day feedback and input to us is that our SROs really don't use them all that much at all. To record. They have them on, but they rarely record.
So what we had to look at last time and prior to this meeting was policy, or I'm not sure what this document.
It's a memo, it's kind of a memo.
Okay, this was a memo that was written in September from the police department, to the school department, I guess. And then you've taken that essentially in terms of internet.
Yes, and referencing the MOU that exists, that's established the SRO and the policy. Those documents that you have.
Standard operating procedure. Yeah, okay.
And one question for you guys to think about when you have kind of time and space to look at the MOU is the MOU with, that was drafted in 2017 and amended in 2018, kind of focuses on safety. You may want to add a clause about the community aspect that you referenced, Deputy Chief, about what the SROs are usually doing, which is heading off problems, doing their, call it community work, or if we want to put something into that.
Into the MOU,
Into the MOU, yeah, that it's not just safety, it's also community liaisoning and
Yeah.
buffering, something. The language obviously could be massaged, but just something to kind of remind parents are looking at this when they are at the beginning of the year
Right.
info session.
Right.
Okay, this isn't just like I'm there to pull, to like police,
Right.
but I'm there to. Yeah.
Relationship building is actually really important, yeah.
I think that's a good idea, great suggestion. And then we built our policy largely off of this memo. We might want to put at the very beginning that type of language once we
Yes.
have it, because I think starting there with the goal that we want to preserve that trust. And there's a lot of students that have pretty great relationships with SROs that we want to.
And it's the continued cooperation between the departments, I think, too, because it's not only the SRO piece, but I know my consent from our safety committee meetings. So it's like, it's all of that, and we rely on them all the time for things, and just being able to put that in writing so that it's not just like, oh yeah, it's happening. It's kind of like what we did with the budget when we pulled out the amount about safety and we put it as its own cost center. It wasn't like, well, there's money in the budget for safety. Well, now we say, there it is. Well, they work with the police department by pulling it out. There it is. So you bring that awareness and you're able to actually point to like, see, this is what we're doing. I think that strengthens it for both sides.
So what I can do, is just add, like, make a little paragraph in recognition of the cooperation, relationship building, reliance. So, and then I'll recirculate.
That would be great.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I like that.
We might want to have, if it's done in time, we might want to have it in the packet, at least as an information item for the board meeting June. That was our hope. Yeah. Works. We would do it in May 12th because that's the retreat. So we're looking at maybe
June,
so far, we can't really find.
June something or other, 9. 2/9.
Okay. If it's not, we can move it.
No, it's on my calendar tonight, so I believe that that's true because Paulette put it on my calendar, so Paulette says tonight, it's tonight.
If we want to have a policy that's largely mirroring what that document says, I feel like we want to try to have it done in time to be in the handbook for the start of school if we can. So that would probably be a top priority for our next policy meeting. Right.
Yeah, so that was kind of looking at the big picture timeline. Do you think this is something that going into the next school year that we would have kind of ready to go?
That's the
That's
whole,
our goal.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this year is, we're at the ninth inning of this year. So,
Hoping, feels
We
like
love
a
you
tenth
doing
inning,
that.
but
yeah.
it's more like a
It's a
tenth
long
inning.
month.
That's all right.
But yeah, just for our sake too, because we're actually we'll start with the high school, so yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm at liberty to disclose it yet, but just happened yesterday.
Good day. Yep, yep.
So if there was an incident tomorrow, would you, that was criminal and involved the SRO, would the camera not be used or? would it be-
They're not even wearing them.
They're not
They're not even wearing
We
them.
have to finish this.
Yeah.
first.
Okay, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, so no, it's,
Okay.
we want to go into the next school year. Stepping into without having to put some, it's same thing we kind of did with the cell phone policy. We wanted it in place for the start of the year because it's hard to start the year. Then get people used to, like, it's too hard. Like, start with, here's everything new
Yeah,
all at once and then just proceed forward until Concord or Washington throws something at us that we've got to change in the middle of the year, which we can pivot, but
Yeah.
it's preferable to just start the year. So getting it done by then would be great.
Okay.
Great for the new families coming in to have maybe the SRO or somebody else be able to speak to it at those orientations in late August would be.
yeah, we'll definitely, yeah, certainly we'll do
It's
that.
always better for them to hear directly
Yeah.
from the people that are in the building.
Sure.
with their kids.
Another thing we talked about at our last meeting was whether or not to have police representation at our school board meeting to be able
Next
to
time we
answer
discuss
questions.
When it's on the agenda.
So
It'd probably be helpful.
if
We can do that.
could have one of you.
Yeah.
For June 9th.
Yep.
That would be great.
June 9th.
I think hearing directly from you would make people feel better than hearing it. That's
Yeah.
for us.
And even if it's the same stuff we discussed here, even though this is being recorded, this is not a popular show. They would rather watch the school board meeting, so. This show would probably be canceled if we were on the network, but it's okay.
Nobody watches network TV.
I know, since how old I am, I'm showing my age. So,
Wait till we get to our policy on social networking or whatever.
right, yeah, seriously,
So-
I'm show my age then.
All right, does anyone have any other questions?
This has been very helpful. I
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the
So,
time to do something.
Jennifer,
We just wanted to
ready
be sure.
revised to go on the agenda?
Yes, to go in the packet, hopefully.
Okay, so Jennifer, do you think you could get the revisement to me by June
I'm
second?
gonna check what, by an hour from now.
Wow. I'm writing that
All right, stop. And then it's intention to do the MOU for the actual cameras also gonna be on June 9th?
Yeah, I think that's the main thing that we're
Yeah.
going to try to
Okay.
approve,
So then,
right? And then,
so I'll
I'm glad you're clarifying, because I've already.
Yes, so I was gonna say, so I'm gonna, as far as, I'm just thinking about how I'm preparing the agenda, so I'm gonna list the school resource officer first, the MOU, and then I'm assuming we're gonna tweak the language on the MOU for the body camera, because then that's like an paragraph. We would have amended it on June 9th, so would we have to add that?
Okay, wait, I might be confused now. Do we need to approve this MOU?
Oh, no, that's already.
Okay,
that's
the SRO one is already in place, yes.
But we're revising it. So it wouldn't be.
That's later, that's later. That's
Oh, that's not June
suggestion
9th.
Later, no. June 9th is this one.
Okay, all right.
Ninth is
That
this
makes
one.
more sense. Okay.
So
Yeah, Jennifer
So
will
this
have
is
to you, and then Mike or somebody will be there
Okay.
tonight to at least answer questions, so
Okay.
that we can approve it that night. Because then after that, the goal is for policy committee to build a policy around the.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that
So
make
June
sense?
9th is the MOU for just the body cameras.
Right,
And then later on, we're gonna do the school resource officer amending that one, not June 9th. Okay, glad I asked.
And then the policy,
We build off the September 25th letter, adding the language that we're maybe suggesting to the MOU in terms of the value of the SROs and that relationship in the schools.
for the policy.
Right.
Yeah.
So otherwise, we're mainly going with that as the base.
the policy, we're going to address at our next policy.
Correct.
Yes.
Which we can't remember when that is.
I know.
Probably-
We're gonna. 19.
Oh, that's good. That's soon. So in theory, we could have that on the June my agenda as well.
That would be helpful if we could have them all together, at least for first read, because then we would have the availability for board members to ask any questions about the policy as well.
Yeah. Unless that's too much for, I don't know, I guess we can work that out
Oh,
later, but let's at least get it on.
I think it's gonna be fine.
19th meeting agenda. Okay.
She's gonna finish the school year
Mhm.
and then, I don't know where her actual last day is going to be. She'll finish the school year in the new SRO. We'll start to shadow her towards the end of this month and for the rest of the school year.
It's such an asset. It really has.
Yeah, my daughter's a freshman over there, and she heard Lynn was leaving. She was really bummed.
Yeah, it is, it's a bummer.
Big shoes to fill.
And if you can bring, like, winter's not being at the door, what's gonna happen in the spring?
All right, well, thank you so much.
Certainly, yeah.
We're in the
Yeah, great questions.
Rest of our agenda, but I do if you want to.
Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Exciting. Appreciate it. See one or both of you on Friday. And that's the meeting. Always exciting.
Would somebody, mind sending a calendar invite in the second for that June 9th? We'll figure out.
I can do that.
And what time is it? 7?
Could watch all the old videos.
And then dark.
it starts at 6, but that may have changed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Shortly. Take care.
Have a good day, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Take care.
This way.
It's fine.
Oh, all right, well, that's good.
That was a lot to get done, but
Yeah,
important stuff, so.
Exactly.
I appreciate just how well they spoke about it in a way that parents would be able to understand it.
I agree.
It's gonna be so helpful to this rolling out. Smoothly.
Yes, I completely agree. I think it's very, I don't want to say. Don't get jinx it. Jinx here. All right, so.
So we're still waiting for the spring update, so we don't have that yet, which I'm sure is, when it comes out, will be chock full of stuff we need to do.
But I appreciated the theme. I felt like it was also
Safety
Safety
related,
related.
yeah, so we were digging around in the e-policies, these are things that, we have on the books that maybe haven't been looked at in a while, they're not necessarily required, but because we have them, I'm sort of bringing them up with whatever the changes have been since our last approval.
Okay, so the video and audio surveillance, we talked into that just a little bit. But this one did have some implications from recent law, did it not? Or is this not?
So this is surveillance, which is not the same.
I see, okay.
So they're talking, the law talks about recording. This is like the buses where there are cameras always rolling on the buses. This is what, Deputy Chief was talking about with like even security cameras or buses or things like that. And we already had a pre-existing policy, which was approved in 2015. There were revisions made by NHSBA in 2021. It's a recommended policy, not required, but since we haven't, we've included the adjustments between 2015 and 2021 here for the committee to look at, determining if that's something you want to include or leave the policy as is.
I have one question about this is whether it would be more expedient to see where all of the different recording bills shake out. I guess we could just do it and then bring it back if we need to.
We could pause and put this off until then, which is fine, so that we're not going back and forth.
And I think the one thing that they're trying to mop up right now is that they accidentally banned recording of sports and graduation, and now they're trying to pass the bill to fix that. They
quickly, because the end of the year's
well,
coming.
they attached it to open enrollment. Try to get open enrollment through because everybody wants graduations recorded, football games recorded. Um, so I do feel like at the minimum, potentially spelling out, graduation and athletics and any events open to members of the public might be one way to.
Now that you're saying that, I wonder though, if we should wait.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because section C is about authorized recording.
That's what I'm
Right.
wondering if
So
that
It just
law
feels,
is going to impact this in other ways.
I think it will.
So,
I think you're right.
yeah, maybe we should put this one to the side for now.
Yeah,
Really problem.
and actually, I mean, even I was, as I started talking about this, I was confused about the difference between recording and surveillance. So I think having them come up at the same time might be more helpful so that there is that
Yeah.
clarity.
Because if this is just security, it's listing off all of the other types of recordings,
Right.
which aren't security.
Right.
I would maybe hold this, and I also am thinking in terms of our evaluation process that we're maybe piloting, maybe to have in policy something that explicitly permits.
Yeah.
Recording in classrooms for evaluation purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where that's going to start in the fall.
I think this must have been where we saw the piece about not being used for the educational records. That can be.
Actually listed on the MOU that Jennifer.
Oh, it is?
Well, it's also in lines 53 through 55 of this policy.
Yeah.
There,
Yeah,
Yeah.
an educational record, so.
yes, there's gonna be a lot of overlap. I think it is wise to hold off. It's not urgent, right?
Right. Not urgent.
I'd rather have it right than.
Okay.
Sustainability is something that is Portsmouth specific, so there's no adjustments to it. It's just something for the committee to look at and see if there's anything that wants, that it needs to be changed or should be adjusted. That's why you don't see any strike throughs.
Sadly, I was just struck by the inconsistency between the policy and the procedures. We don't do farm to school anymore. And as far as I've heard, we don't, even quite do recycling the way that this suggests that we should. So,
I'm in favor of keeping policy.
yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking, is
Yeah.
how do we sort of help it become more active or closely monitored? In some ways, I feel like there is overlap between this and the wellness committee almost,
Could be, yep.
in terms of like, things.
No, the farm to
reminded
school
me of that.
piece maybe, but cycling and I don't know.
No, I guess that. Well, what do you propose?
No, I'm not sure we need to change it.
Oh, just leave it alone.
Yeah. There's something specific, Patty, that you thought we needed to.
It's just that it's been since 2015, so it's 11 years and it's worth of us just taking a look.
I think I'm curious to know what are the procedures that are sort of underlying this, that are especially around the food piece.
That's what I was gonna say, so I'd love to get some more input on it.
And
And
then
where we are.
data we can change it. Better reflect ways that we could encourage. But you could amend it at that point,
Mhm.
but.
Okay.
No.
We can set that on the side.
Do we wanna try to do something about that though, or do you wanna wait until we have some?
I think by the
We have a retreat.
So one of the, if you went through that endless retreat packet, one of the goals for the policy committee was to consider a process for how we monitor the impact of policies and how we monitor the effectiveness of policies. Because our role isn't to set the procedures, but if we make a policy, like we changed the discipline policy a few years ago, and then do we know what changed as a result of that? Did it have the right effect? Did it have unintended consequences that made things harder for people in schools? So we want to look at it again. So that was something I thought any of the board agrees that that could be something we look at over the next year. Just so we could have a standard way to make it easy to maybe track. We have a lot of policies on the books that may not be 100% in line with operationally what happens. And ideally, I feel like those should match.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard to keep up too.
So this one though isn't, I mean, I'm, as you know, fully in favor of that. But this one is not a new policy, so it wouldn't necessarily fall under that category of being reviewed. But maybe it would be reviewed. Maybe we're talking about reviewing all policies and their
Well,
effectiveness.
I think all policies might be overly ambitious because there's a lot that I don't even know that there will be interest. But I think
Those are very dry. When you have the D policies, they're all the financial ones, like, oh, okay, this
I
is
didn't
fine.
just every single policy. I meant,
think the
like,
intention-
even if it's not a new policy, we might
correct.
do that.
Develop
Updating it or something.
Process for monitoring compliance with school board policies and impact of policies on student outcomes and district operations is the way that it's in the retreat docket right now. That everybody totally read.
I mean, not
Steve's not hear it.
I know,
Oh, yeah.
definitely.
Memorized.
And we can tweak that as a board. So I think that could cover,
saying,
it could cover like a substantial change to something. It could cover something like cell phones where it's been a year and then you want to look again to see how well that's working.
right.
Or it could be something like this where we liked it when we did it 10 years ago. And now we're not sure if it's still aligned with.
Okay.
Does
Well,
that
as long, yeah, as long as we can come back to it because it is 11 years old. So
agreed?
I don't want to just leave it forever. I think it should be revisited.
It needs to be sustainable.
Exactly.
So in the past, because it's been a while since we've had a chance to kind of go back and look at old policies.
Mhm.
When we haven't made any changes to it, I just put a little stamp at the bottom saying the
Review.
PC reviewed.
Yep.
And then that way we know at least we had eyes on it. Are you good with that?
I mean, my feeling is if we're reviewing it, which we have done, I guess, then don't want to just leave it alone. It's not to say I don't think it's good policy. It's just that I feel like we should do a little bit of work into making sure that it's consistent with what we're doing.
But a review doesn't necessarily mean action. You could review it with the intent of,
That's
Returning
just
to it.
approval at the same
right,
time.
it's just a review. So you could say you've reviewed it with the intent of returning to it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then that way, at least at Paulette's
That makes me
point,
feel better.
right, to Paulette's point, at least it's like, oh my God, this is, you know, in a couple of years, like, oh my God, this one's 17 years old. Nobody's looked at it. It's like, oh, okay.
So literally all that will happen is I'll
The
add a
date
little-
of review.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add the footer. It doesn't go to the board. I just update it on the website, so.
And then we could still take a
Okay.
look at it more
I
closely.
can accept that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want you to be good.
I have one question. It says best practices. Are those practices that are encouraged? What's the intent of that language? Best practices, because that's more of like, here are examples of how, when I read that, I think here are examples of how this policy is supported. I wonder if we can just make that clear.
Where is that?
Just the big third, line 16.
Oh,
Sustainable. Is that intended that all of these are examples of?
Was this an offshoot of the Sustainability Committee from City Council? Is that where this came from originally?
No, it was, we were heavy into, it was starting the farm to school and we had a few board members that were, it was important as far as that we
Yeah.
wanted a unique policy to Portsmouth as far as.
Okay.
It didn't have anything to do with city council at the time.
I mean, this isn't a required policy.
No, it's something
Yeah.
that, it was important to board members that were on the board at the time, as far as, and there was a lot in the 2015 to 2016 of creating our own. So it,
I think it could be worth a, well,
Yeah.
but maybe after we know a bit more about where we want to.
Right. Are you comfortable with that, Steve, if we don't make any changes to it now, but
Well, yeah.
we consider that because I agree with you, it's sort of a,
We don't
it's a good
typically-
question.
Well, and we don't typically put that into policy. We don't typically say, here's what we think, and here are the practices we support. Normally, those are actually usually done in whatever, the schools, or
Mhm.
they're not explicit from the board.
Right.
Would not be sad to revive farm to school for the record,
Nor would I.
but
Okay, so we will put this one.
Stamp it as reviewed and come back later.
Okay.
Okay.
tell us how you really feel.
Right, I just trying to, I'm looking at, time. The next one that you've got in the packet should have been plucked out because that is not something we would have been able to get to, so we're just gonna rest along and just on the agenda. This transportation one, this one is tied to the seatbelt policy. Also tied to vehicle safety. These all kind of together.
Can I ask a question on this one? Line 32, people who attend chartered public or non-public schools shall be entitled to the same transportation privileges as provided for students in public school. So does that mean we get buses to charter public or non-public schools?
So those are the revisions in the NHSBA policy. So that has not been part of policy.
And if I may be a broken record, that will change again based on what version of open enrollment passes.
Is that, I think that's where it's coming from?
No, well, I think that's from the charters bill that passed,
Okay.
what, like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
probably 3 years ago.
So this one was 2021
Mhm.
was when this was all put in.
Right.
So it does say though, if you keep reading, it says using the same routes and termination points that are established for students attending a district school. So to me, that doesn't expand much. At first I was like, oh, are we gonna be shuttling these kids to different towns and things? But if it's only within those same routes, then it's not quite, the impact is too much.
Right, but if you're bringing them to the charter school, you're bringing them to the non-public school, you've at least got to add those destinations as part of the routes, right?
I don't know, right, it's the same route.
I'm not sure we provide transportation because the
Too.
lines 2 through 15 is our current policy. That's all redacted. It's all crossed off.
Okay.
Line 17 and following is what's in the revisions as of 2021. And again, this is not a required policy, it's recommended. So again, you don't have to make any of these changes. We could look at the current EEA, put a reviewed on whatever date and leave it and wait for
I think,
a new law.
yeah, the only thing that I liked about the new language is I think we've had questions come up in the past about the amount of distance from school that makes someone eligible for transportation. I think that would be
Yeah.
valuable to have in policy. But I think
I
that
agree.
in terms of who's gonna get a ride, that's gonna change by June, I think. Sorry, Beth. Like everything is June.
It's progress here.
I know. Well, they're talking about the possibility, for example, that if somebody wants to be coming into Portsmouth from out of district, that there's potential that they could have access to our buses, but the parent might have to bring the kid to a bus stop within our district on our routes in order to ride the bus.
Yeah.
Like that's been one of the ways that they're talking about it. So I suspect that's maybe part of why this is worded in that way. That hasn't passed yet, so.
Well, so that I agree with you about the minimum distances and stuff, but that's in the footnote that we're supposed to delete.
Right, well, that's my
This,
question.
this might actually help you guys. In the old policy, RSA 189, that actually does specifically refer to kindergarten through grade 8. It's no more than 2 miles. So you actually already have that in your policy. It's just not spelled out.
Because it's in the RSA.
It's in the RSA.
But what do we
But
do
it
in
is
practice?
policy.
Because we pick up closer than 2 miles to elementary, I believe. I'm not
We
sure
do.
about the others.
We do.
I thought it was
Well,
one.
that's the minimum though. You- if there's someone within 2 miles, you have to get them, but it doesn't mean you can't if they're under 2 miles.
Right.
No, I understand.
Okay.
It would be good to have just a standard, even if it is just in our policy, not, you know, unrelated to the RSA, obviously.
But again, this is not something that you have to change if you're concerned that we're gonna have to make adjustments. This could come back in the spring update. Because if
Yeah.
we're gonna have pupils who need to be put on a bus stop that I don't know.
Is this a review and no changes at this time, Paul?
If that's what we can do, that, sure.
Or yeah, so lines 2 through 15, you could table it too.
Well, okay. So the only thing that just if we keep pushing off, we're
We're gonna get this.
We're gonna-
update and then-
yes, we're gonna get the spring update as far as that it may not come back up for a while.
Unless it is on the spring update because of that
Right.
transportation piece.
So if we think that that might happen, maybe the PC reviewed and then,
Because if it's PC reviewed, you're committing to staying with lines 2 through 15. And then just waiting for whatever's coming out of Concord. You're just saying, yep, we looked at it.
Because just with all this new language, if you're talking about how we determine residency for the, I mean, it's like all these things that are not gonna be true in like 2 months. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
no, yeah, it's, you know,
The more I read, the less I feel.
this exercise,
Yeah.
it's the oldest ones that we're trying to hit and to at least have eyes on it.
Yeah,
So no, it's all good.
yeah, I would potentially wait until to see what.
Yeah, I agree. So in my mind, I'd rather say we're tabling it until that law goes through because even if we're just reviewing it, then I prefer to add some of the language about distance and stuff.
Fair. And I think this one has a very high likelihood of needing a fix over the summer.
The tabled until open enrollment. I don't know. What's the
You
next
could
step?
say table. I mean, I think we should know by the end of the legislative session, by May 28th, we know if it's passed.
Okay.
And then what the governor does next with that information, who can say?
Right.
But there's very specific language in all of those bills that looks at who gets transportation, who pays for it, like who qualified, you know, all of those pieces.
Yeah.
Um,
So that doesn't,
Yeah, and I'm also just thinking in terms of the distance, for example, like we do have families thinking that, you know, who might go to Newcastle or that would fall within the distance. And so then are we committing to bus to Newcastle? Depending on how we word this and how the law passes would be a fairly reasonable question.
Yeah.
Just as one example.
okay, so. Seatbelts.
This one, EEL does not exist in the NHSBA manual. And what it's asking or requiring is now included in EEBA, which is an NHSBA policy, which we don't have, which could theoretically replace EEL if you want to adopt what EEBA outlines, which talks not just about seatbelts, but also about having a license, reporting accidents, you know, just some of those things. So if that's something that you want to adopt, we could put EEBA in place of EEL.
So Kate's question I had about this one, does this include buses? When you say,
Vehicles. This is,
The seatbelt.
yeah,
Yeah, I was wondering about that too, because.
which one are you talking about? EEL?
well, either one. Yeah.
EEBA talks about vehicles. So
Yeah,
this
but it's
is
a vehicle, a bus, or just a car?
line 15. For purposes of this policy, vehicle refers to any motorized vehicle licensed and registered for operation on public highways and any motorized vehicle not intended for highway use but operated for school official business, tractors, utility carts, maintenance vehicles, snowplows, probably golf carts.
So it does include buses.
I think we should put the word buses in there. We're gonna have that.
Definitely. And then next
Do-
question is
do-
section C, line 35. We don't have car seats for kids. But if it is for buses, we don't have,
Do not think is where there's belts on the bus.
Are there seatbelts on
Making
the
this
bus?
they don't totally wear the
Okay.
seatbelts.
Well, I guess I raised the question because I think, are there even, if you require seatbelts on the bus, I mean, I guess I wonder, sometimes I've seen different studies that sometimes indicate seatbelts are more of a hazard than safety because,
Seats are so high and, right.
right, so that's why I wondered, should this not include seat buses? Should there be something separate for buses?
Well, I'd also be interested in reviewing that research again. I know that was the research, but
Some of that is due to less, like sides tailor restraint systems.
Yeah.
Like the older buses were just had the big strap that came from the ceiling and then the kid is like this tall, like, yeah, like they totally get clocked here and then, you know.
so I just
Yeah, I don't know.
sure I'm understanding this. The EEBA is not one we have.
No, but we have
So this
EEL.
version that we're looking at is just essentially the NHSBA version.
Right, we have EEL, which is not a school board association policy. And if we believe it's important for people to ride in motor vehicles to use seatbelts, that's included in EEBA. Which you could specify in EEBA, it's about motor vehicles that do not include buses. So if you have students who are traveling, you have a team on the van, you want them to be in their seats with the seatbelt on. If you have somebody transporting in a car, because we have some shuttle service that goes back and forth between RJLA and the high school, making sure that folks are wearing their seatbelts, making sure that they're not using cell phones while operating the vehicle. That's included in EEBA. And so you could specify that this is for vehicles not including buses.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have a vehicle safety policy overall rather than just
Right, yeah, that's, yeah.
But, I mean, we brought up some good points about this language. We don't know if it applies to buses or not, and.
Because it's not
and
required
that we don't really
policy,
have car seats for kids.
and because it's not a required policy, can delineate what the vehicles are. You can define vehicles as.
And I would be curious if this applies just to our school buses or if we're talking about field trip transportation or, you know. I don't know. The way this is written, it would seem like if it is buses, we're asking the bus drivers to make sure that everybody's buckled in, which could delay our bus process by a considerable number of hours.
But at the same time, if that is what's safer, then
Then
we should
want
be
that.
asking for it.
So
So
100%.
it's the truth.
My other concern with buses is if you have it required, what will that mean for the operate? I don't even know there are buses, do our buses have seatbelts currently? So if we do require them on the buses, does that mean that we have to ensure that they're used?
Yeah.
If it's student,
That's what this says.
And if the student is not using this on a I just wonder if it's even operable.
Okay, so in the RSA that is referenced in this policy, RSA 265-107, Part 2 says, a person shall not be guilty of a violation of this section, which is child passenger restraints, if the motor vehicle the person is driving is regularly used to transport passengers for hire, is a school bus weighing more than 10,000 pounds, or is a school bus weighing less than 10,000 pounds manufactured without seatbelts, or if there is an IEP statement contradicting the use of restraints, is a vehicle manufactured before 1968, is a motorcycle, is an antique motor vehicle, is a farm tractor.
But this literally says tractors in here.
So it's what the RSA 265 says is that this is motor vehicles that are not school buses. So this is your minivans, your cars.
Well, that makes total
So
sense.
this,
Okay,
it's a vehicle that is not a bus. So
so we need to spell that out, I think.
Yeah.
And otherwise, it looks very common sense to me.
So if we just change, I feel like if we have the purpose section right up top and we just define what this excludes, like add an extra sentence to say this does not apply to
school buses.
school buses, would that
Yep.
cover us
Mhm.
generally?
Yep.
So if we did in line 6 after that first sentence, just say this policy applies only to vehicles, not to school buses. Does that?
Yeah, although would it like a van style school bus be called?
It talks about the poundage, which
Yeah, so should we actually say that?
Right, because it's special ed,
weighing
special
limit.
ed bus.
Special ed buses, they have to use the type of restraints like
Right.
mandated under the IEP.
And then
Usually-
even that, there's a carve out for students who should not be restrained.
Right.
Correct.
So I think if you say what your original sentence was, which I've already forgotten.
Me too, but I think it was
Does not
just, this
apply
does not
to
apply to school buses,
school buses.
period.
Yeah, and just put that in line 6 and then you're covered because now you're lined up with the RSA, which folks could go look at that if they want to know how many pounds is a bus.
Okay.
But I feel like a common sense, like, like they're Jello, we know what they are. Like, I don't know.
Well, it talks about, they go very specific.
Sometimes I see a minivan that says school bus on it, like, it has.
And then there's like, call in the bus driver for this.
Well, and I wonder if that designation is specifically for things like stopping at railroad tracks.
Yeah.
Because it's got the lights flashing.
Yes.
I don't think it, we're splitting hairs. but
I know, I
anyway.
get a little specific.
No, I mean, it's important. We don't know what this applies to. We're,
Okay, I think that is a very helpful addition. And then we don't offer driver's ed, so section
But
C.
we should.
Okay, that's for another conversation.
Try and make it fun for you.
What, we don't know if
Great.
we drive or
Should we,
No.
should we build that into our programming now? We'll just add that as a policy.
They can still driver's license for high school.
So,
Did that change? I'm just saying, must have changed.
Now you just pay an arm and a leg for it.
yeah, and then you teach them to drive yourself.
that's why Virgo's great.
Okay. So with that one change, are we okay? Or-
Now, but you brought up a point about car seats, which I think is a good one.
But we don't transport or. I was just thinking, so for P, they're older than 2 and that would not be an issue. then.
Right.
So we just leave that part in there anyway, and that we don't.
Remember, it's gonna be in a car.
Yeah. Just common sense. If we never do it, but maybe there's some rare situation where.
You gotta make a decision on line 75. Say business administrator in there. Same thing on line 83.
I mean, is that how you normally handle it?
Yeah.
The superintendent and business administrator.
Could say and or.
Yeah.
Under dissemination of policies on line 115. says any employer, employee, or designated volunteer is authorized to operate a vehicle. The employee will be provided with and will provide written acknowledgement of copy of this policy. Is that doable?
Part of what we do at the beginning of the year with required training for all staff is they are required to review policies. And we will highlight certain ones that they have to look at. And then they sign off in a Google form that they have read this. And they type their name in and they date it. And so we keep record of,
Okay, so that,
so it's not like some handwritten.
well, I'm just imagining someone says, oh, I need to drive the kid, and then all of a sudden someone has to remember to give them a call. I just wanted to.
There's a
proceed.
every year, yep. And people hate me for it, but it's the annual required training. It's like, you've got to look at this, you've got to go through this. It's a lot. Well, you remember the beginning of the year and like, it's a lot. But this is one of the things that adopting this, we would include this in make sure you look at the EBA.
And I do remember trying to have to chase down, get a signature from someone, like, I haven't gotten your signature yet on this.
So in 119, then would this acknowledgement be sent to the business administrator again or human resources?
I would say business administrator. That way it's all in the same place so that if there's an accident, the business administrator can cross-reference, okay, they read this, they know what they need to do. Why didn't they do this? Or why did they tell me 3 days late?
And then do we want to leave in line 17 and 18? Do we want to leave that list as it is? Tractors, utilities.
It's a bit puzzling.
Maybe we take out tractors.
And do we drive utility cars? Like, what?
And the end note references golf carts too,
Right.
which we have those because that's what shuttles people at graduation.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that sentence is less confusing. Should we just put a period after business?
And then we can get,
It's very.
you can get rid of that,
That's all I say, any motorized vehicle, not
Yeah.
for highway use, so
period.
I think that's pretty clear. Okay.
Okay. All right, I just have one question. Yeah, line 68. Actually, I guess it would be 69. We do not have board policy EEAG.
Ah.
So am I just removing that whole little section?
Yes.
Okay.
Easy.
And then just, you might have said this, but I was busy taking notes and I apologize. 97, is it just gonna be the superintendent? Or are we leaving it as superintendent designee?
I think it's okay to have a designee, but.
Okay.
I think so too.
The superintendent.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I got it.
I'd like to
And
see one.
with this one going in, eel is going away.
Ah,
Getting rid of the eels, no eels.
okay, so we're gonna recommend rescinding
Yep.
So we actually pass the policy and move
Yes.
forward.
We have 10 minutes left.
Wow. Great.
Uh, We're looking at social networking.
Yes. Should. What do y'all think about skipping that one and going personal records? Just, I feel like the social networking one is gonna take a lot more work than the
Sure.
personal records. Feels like we could fit it in better. Okay. Although I'm dying to get to this one, so important.
It's just the time we're calling it social networking. It's actually kind of great.
And my face. My face.
Wow,
Oh,
way back.
Webster. Definitely needs an update, no doubt. But, okay, personal records, so, okay, this one's a little more straightforward.
Nothing stands out for me in this.
The legal references got added. They passed some new laws since 2015. This was last updated, yeah,
It's
so.
very old, even through New Hampshire School Board Association. It hasn't been looked at since 2015.
From them.
From then,
Not much here, but this can be under PC review.
No
Ka-ching.
specific thoughts or objections.
Well, we don't need to approve it for the legal references.
no.
No.
Okay.
It's a bibliography.
Okay. Check.
Yep.
Wow, look at that.
You can call it a meeting if you want, because if you think the next one's gonna be a lot, we could.
I mean, I think there's a lot of work to do on it, maybe, could I speak briefly to the two future meetings? Yes, let's do that.
This is homework. I believe we're gonna wait a little bit.
Yes, I am doing my final meeting today on that, so I think after that we'll have all the information collected and then we can move forward.
I think quickly with crowdfunding, I believe that there are substantial concerns among students and staff about the current policy. So I would like to just make sure as we're looking at that we do crowdfunding. So this is everything from like raising money for senior prom to teachers using donors choose to like, I don't know.
We did create a policy 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That specified that we could only use one platform that teachers, students, I guess, I thought it was just teachers at the time, but could only use one specific platform called Donors Choose to
Okay.
fundraise.
But we're not
That's
approving
great.
donors choose.
Proving to be really challenging
Yeah.
for the students and all of their sort of organizations that aren't really able to fund.
I think it would be nice to try to clean that up somewhat before the start of school so that students are able to, I mean, the senior class was not able to run their auction or like fundraise for prom. And like the faculty advisors can't own that auction as the adult who like runs it because then they're gambling on school property. I mean, there's like all this stuff that I think was just unintended
This is a good example of.
interruption.
We need to
Exactly. So, and I feel like during the budget cycle this year, there were some mentions of Donors Choose as a great way for people to access supplies. And I think if that's our intention, then we should be facilitating that, not putting up roadblocks to it.
Mhm.
But that's a later conversation. And then with AI,
But wait, I'm sorry, before you move on,
sorry.
can we try to put that one on the agenda for next time? Does that make sense?
My only question with next time is if we want student input, I'm just not sure we're gonna get anyone on student council or anywhere to like give us that input at this time of year.
But if we want to get it on the books before next.
think we have to wait for a new BA too.
Yeah,
Because like right now,
that's fair.
I don't know how we could set this in motion without
Okay.
the business.
Because I know it was Nathan who was behind
It
it,
was.
and he had some very
Get some specific.
specific concerns
Yeah.
about why it needed to be this way and being able to track money and how cash is
And
just
the
trackable.
auditing works.
The auditors and things, yeah, exactly, so.
But if we could potentially look at procedures going into the school year that might make it a little bit easier within the confines of the current policy for students to like do their fall fundraisers. Because some of this is procedure, like I know principals have to approve Donors Choose, but I'm hearing that that's not being done in a very routine way.
Maybe we need to meet with Nathan and find out why. I mean, sorry, going back,
I
but,
mean, you could,
but
Yeah.
just to find out why he advocated so strongly for this.
that probably would be the best place to
Yeah.
start. And then at least you've got the history and the actual concerns, and then you could move forward from there.
Because there could be some procedure shifts that we could do. So like if the policy says that principals have to approve Donors Choose, which is I'm pretty sure what it says, it's a procedure to be like, what are the directions to them in terms of how they should be reviewing those, right? So
Right.
maybe we could at least at a minimum look at that.
Right.
So is the committee going to meet during the summer?
This committee,
This.
I love how she's like, what? Will you be in Italy or will you be?
I don't go to Italy till September.
Oh. We can try, but I feel like that's it.
Well, I just
About
want
which
to
we're
because
thinking.
we can try to do something.
Tomorrow.
You're
Like procedure piece is not really.
We don't need to do
It's not
anything
being policy.
So I guess the ask would be at a minimum, can you maybe just take a look at the procedures and see if there's anything within the existing procedures that could better facilitate Donors Choose and student fundraisers? If that's,
Yeah.
you know, that feels like you might be able to just look at that and say the intention is say for the seniors to be able to run an auction in the fall to pay for all their events.
Okay, and then we can come back to it on an agenda and policy.
Because I agree with you,
We
we
have
want
student
student VA to be on board with what we do.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense.
Yes.
So for next time, we've got at this meeting, we've got the MOU related policy. We pushed off social networking
Mhm.
and homework
I think,
and AI.
well,
Is that the four?
I think so. And I have a question about AI too, really quickly. Because I think Zach mentioned that there was gonna potentially be some sort of working group within the district that was gonna take a look at this. And I'd love to see there be a really close relationship between this committee and that group so that we're not at cross purposes or going in different directions. And I don't know if that group has been formed. I'm not sure where he was at with that, but I just think, like making sure, I wouldn't want to have the group go for like a whole year and then it comes to the board and then the board is going, we were hoping it went in some other
Right.
direction.
So then maybe we don't put AI on next time. That just
Well-
still stays in the future.
I guess what I want to know is where is that working group? How do we coordinate that with the board? You know, whether we need to have them come into this meeting and tell us what they're doing and for us to share any
I think we
questions
certainly
or-
will need them to come in and tell us.
Yeah.
what's happening. Maybe,
So like if
At
it
the
was on the
moment-
agenda and we talked to this group, that would be really productive, but I'm just not sure where it's at.
But then that's the tricky part. And this time of year, it gets harder and harder to pin
It's not-
people
I
down.
don't think this time of year is good time.
But I just don't want to have a situation where there's people working all summer, you know, kind of on their own. and
I
come
don't
back and
think
going
that
into-
there's that intent. I'm not even sure that they figured out. We can find out from Zach
Okay,
where this is, but we'll leave it in future. So it'll be MOU.
well, do we want to put it on the agenda? We know it's tabled it.
Well, I also, one of the things I wanted to do is just look around and see what other policies are in other districts. Because I know people are, you know, sort of slowly starting to implement things or trying different
Yeah.
things. And it might be interesting just to have sort of just to start our research on the policy side while the other group is looking into how it's used in our classrooms.
New Hampshire School Board actually has EHAG.
Oh, they do.
Yeah,
Why don't we have it?
because we haven't passed it yet. So I mean, I feel like we could put EHAG on the agenda to look at it and just start the conversation.
That makes sense.
And then go from there.
The next policy.
They had one, yeah.
No, they hadn't at the beginning. This is relatively new.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay, I think that would be appropriate and then
It's starting
find out.
And
what's
maybe
happening with
Zach
this group.
could come, or we could at least know at that meeting what the status or
Mhm.
intention is for that working group, so that we're all starting on the same page.
Sure, that makes sense.
Okay, and then how are we handling, I'm just trying to think of logistics, the police, the policy? What am I doing?
So Jennifer's gonna come back with the revised MOU that we looked at this morning.
Okay,
She's gonna send that to you. She said within the hour. So
Yeah.
we'll probably
well,
get
no,
that.
that was the other one.
No,
That was just the added paragraph.
right. So
Revised it.
we're gonna take that to the board for approval, but then that and the memo from Mike Maloney is gonna form the basis of the policy. So is the policy committee gonna draft a policy?
Yes,
To include in the 19th?
We can do that.
yes.
Okay, so you're gonna send me something ahead of time?
So I think,
Isn't there an existing?
no.
No.
So I think the intention, if I understood, was we take this September 25th memo from the deputy chief. It was in our policy committee packet.
It's part of
And
the packet.
we add, it's the first page after the list of policies.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, all right.
To add the language that Jennifer's gonna draft for the MOU.
Yeah.
That talks about right at the top of this, what's the importance of that trust and community building and all of that.
You're saying we're gonna
Add that to here and then let this be the shell of our policy.
Right.
Because this isn't.
But I think we
English.
could, in the meantime, do a little work on that. To
Yeah.
just make it more reflective of our structure, policy structure.
Okay, so I'm gonna take his memo.
Yes.
I'm gonna add my header.
Yep.
Add the line.
Yep,
And then whatever Jennifer adds as the additional paragraph, I'm popping at the top.
Correct. And then I think this can go on.
And in the meantime, one of us is inspired should turn it into more of a policy again.
What would you, I mean,
Well, what I can do is when I get Jennifer's piece, I'll send it to the three of you. And then you guys can tweak it and then just maybe send it back when you
Yeah.
highlight the I'm good about it.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's fine.
that would be good because
Yeah, that'd be really
it's hard to
helpful.
do that in the meeting setting. It's a lot of.
Thank you.
All right.
Good.
You okay?
Okay.
Yes.
Will you